Every day, thousands of Comcast engineers and technologists like Oluseyi put people at the heart of everything they create.
Some of my favorite moments throughout my life are watching sports with my dad. Now I work at Comcast as part of the team that created our AI highlight technology, which uses AI to detect the major plays in a sports game.
And now, millions of sports fans will never miss a moment. Visit ComcastCorporation.com to learn more.
Welcome to Wisconsin in Focus. I'm JD Davidson. A new poll released this week paints a picture of what is on the mind of Wisconsinites, especially when it comes to their opinion on the national and state economy. It also tells a story of how those in Wisconsin are handling their personal finances. Joining us today is Ben Yount, Wisconsin contributor for the Center Square. Ben, tell us more about the poll and what it says in terms of the economy.
I've been writing here in Wisconsin since, 2018. And I learned yesterday, the day before we taped this podcast, that the Marquette Law School Poll is the third most trusted poll in the United States.
Wow.
We've known that it's been the gold standard here for years, but to sort of get that external affirmation of, Charles Franklin and his guys over at Marquette, they really know what they're doing. And so when we cite the Marquette poll, and if you've read anything over at the Center Square all week, we've written a couple of 3 different stories because this is a very thorough, very expansive poll that asks not just horse race questions, who do you support more, President Biden or former President Trump? It doesn't just ask the, hey, what do you think about Tony Evers question? This gets down into, like you said, views of the national economy versus the state economy versus what you could call the personal economy. And we've seen this in other polls. Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce usually does a snapshot of business owners, I'd say probably 4 times a year. And the Wisconsin economy always gets better reviews than the national economy. And I equate this to the idea of, I don't like Congress, but my congressman, he's a good person. She's a good gal. We really like her. Jody is solid, and we'll send her back next year. Whereas most people hate other people's congressmen.
Sure. I don't want government spending money on pork projects, but my pork projects are okay. Yeah. I need my street paved.
Yeah, look, the lights at the high school field, those need to be replaced. And that's not pork. That's just good government, JD.
Sure,
I don't know what you're talking about. Somebody else with their catch-up study, but come on. The Lincoln Railer football team needs to play under new lights, LED. It's energy efficient. It's exactly what it is. That when you look at the polls of national economy versus state economy, the state economy is generally a little less bad. And less bad is not the same as good. And we see this here in the Marquette poll, that the national economy, 4% of people in the poll say it's excellent, 30% say it's good, 34% say it's not so good, and 32% say it's poor. That's about twice the number of people who say the Wisconsin economy is poor. And Charles Franklin, who is the pollster over at Marquette, walked through the numbers a little bit. And again, I think less bad is the better way to describe the view that people in Wisconsin have of the Wisconsin economy versus the national economy.
45% say excellent or good, 38% say not too good, and 16% say poor. So that 16% is half of the rate that say the national economy is poor, saying Wisconsin's economy is poor. On the other hand, it's still only 45% saying excellent or good. We're not up into a majority saying Wisconsin's economy is doing well. But that is still a number of points ahead of the view of the country.
Yeah, the national economy, the poll says 34% say it's either excellent or good. And in that, it's 2 ratings. 4% of people say the economy is excellent. 30% say the national economy is good. 41% say the state economy is good. So you can see that nobody really thinks the economy is chugging along doing great. But in Wisconsin, where people can see it, touch it, they know their job's a little bit more secure. They know what their boss may be thinking. If they're an employer, they sort of are looking at their numbers going out. There's almost always going to be more confidence the closer you get to what you can actually see and touch. I have no idea what it's like to live in Alabama or Texas, but I can tell you exactly the difference between my home in Brookfield, Wisconsin, and the weekend that we just spent up in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And it's a bit of a difference.
So that's kind of a broad look at what people think nationally and statewide. What do they think about what's going on inside their living rooms?
Yeah, that's the rub. And again, pollsters are very scientific because this is science and this is not meant to just be a talking point. They ask people questions. They have the margin of error. There's a lot of math that goes into these polls. And Franklin exposed a part of this data point that if you just look at the numbers, you miss. Again, when asked, are you living comfortably? Are you just getting by or are you struggling? 46% of people in Wisconsin say they are living comfortably. That's up 1 point from the last time the poll asked this question back in April. 37% of people say they're just getting by. It was 40% back in April. And 17% of people say they're struggling. Now, when you look at that, because again, people are bad at math, you say, 46, 37, 17, nearly half the people in the state say they're doing well. They're living comfortably. You got to kind of add the 37 and the 17 till you realize that more than half of people say they're not living comfortably. And Franklin hit on something that, again, is not reflected in these numbers. But if you look back historically at these Marquette Law School polls, it tells a much bigger story.
And on family finances, we saw a 1 point increase in the percent saying they're living comfortably, but we saw a 2 point increase in the percent saying they're struggling. And so that's a very mixed picture about how people feel about their finances. Pre-COVID, we were seeing in the high 50s or even 60% saying they were living comfortably. So this is considerably more negative than it was in 2019.
Before COVID, 60% of people in Wisconsin said they were living comfortably. Now it's 46%. That means in 4 years, 14% of people have fallen off, say their life is not as good, say they're doing worse. And when you're talking about a state where the margin of victory in the last presidential election was 22,000 votes, and the question that is going to be asked again and again and again and again and again here in Wisconsin, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? The poll says there's 14% of people in Wisconsin who can point to it and say, no, I'm not. The price of gas, the price of groceries, the price of a new home, the price of a new car, taxes in many communities across this state. And if there's one data point in this entire poll, and again, this is a poll that asks, favorability, unfavorability of the governor. It says, who would you vote for in the race for president? Former President Trump or President Biden. They even ask about, RFK Jr. and Jill Stein. If there is one piece of data that jumps out of this latest Marquette poll to me, it's that number. That before COVID, 60% of people in Wisconsin said they were living comfortably, and now 46% say they are. 14% fewer, a double-digit drop in the quality of life, and that is something that is huge in a state, in an election where people are going to have to decide, do they want 4 more years of what they've got now, or 4 more years of something different?
You're right, Ben. That's significant. And thanks for joining us today. Listeners can keep up with this story and more on the Marquette poll at thecentersquare.com.